We will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Harm, if you'll lead us in the pledge.
Salute, pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, very good. Thank you for that. So, Mr. Clerk, if you'll start with roll call.
All right, directors, when you call your name, please indicate your presence. Director Bullhan.
Here.
Frost. Harris. Absent. Hume.
Here.
Kozlowski. Teeter.
Here.
Vice Chair Baines.
Present.
Vice Chair Lozano.
Here.
Chair Villegas.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you for that. So Robert, any communication that you need to share at this point?
There's no public comment.
No public comment and no slips to speak on items not on the agenda. So with that, we will then move on. Our first item is item of consent. That's approving the minutes from the May 2nd, 2024 lunar meeting. So do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
We have a motion by Lozano. Thank you very much. Second by Frost. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none. That motion carries unanimously. Item 2 is our action item. That's the 2025 Blueprint Land Use Assumptions. We've scheduled 45 minutes for it. Don't know if we'll need the whole 45, and I believe Zach is providing us with staff report. So, floor is yours.
Thank you. Just getting our PowerPoint coming up. Good afternoon, members of the board. My name is Zach Miller. I'm the program manager for the 2025 Blueprint, our Metropolitan Transportation Plan and Sustainable Community Strategy. I'm joined here by Dov Caden, Senior Land Use Planner as well. We'll be here to help answer questions at the end of the presentation. So just going through what we'll be talking about today. So I'm going to be starting off by providing an overview of what's occurred over the past couple of months as it relates to the 2025 Blueprint. Then I'll be providing some context on detail on the statements of commitment, which address how the 2004 Blueprint vision and the 2025 MTPSCS, which we're calling the 2025 Blueprint, relate to one another. I'll then provide a brief overview of the discussion scenario land use assumptions we are asking you to consider here today. And finally, I'll outline the staff recommendations to the Lunar Committee, and we'll wrap by discussing next steps. So as you can see around the timeline in front of you, if you can actually read it, the next action that staff is asking that the board consider, the full board consider, is adopting a single set of land use assumptions at the next full board meeting coming on June 20th in Yuba City. So the major milestones and tasks associated with the land use process that have been completed to date are here on the screen in front of you. We've discussed the first 4 items on this list in depth at previous committee as well as board meetings, so I'm not going to be going into those today. However, I would like to go over what has been happening over the past couple of months as it relates to the 2025 Blueprint and specifically the land use assumptions. So at the April board meeting, the land use assumptions for the discussion scenario for the 2025 Blueprint were presented. During this meeting, the SACOG board directed staff to develop and analyze an alternative land use strategy that really consolidated growth in developing and potentially developing communities relative to the discussion scenario. So the purpose of this was really to have fewer developing and potential developing community areas in order to show more complete build out of these community types. This new alternative was named option 3, complete communities, and that was presented to the board in May. It's important to note here that at this April board meeting, the board also directed staff to maintain the discussion scenario as an option in the event that the new alternative, that being option 3, that was developed by staff, was deemed by the board to be infeasible or incompatible with the policy framework of the 2025 Blueprint. So then at the May board meeting, staff presented option 3, complete communities, and the board did not express support for advancing that option 3, and any further due to concerns over feasibility as well as inconsistency with local priorities. At this May board meeting, as well as from local agency staff, we also heard the desire to shift the land use allocations potentially to a larger number of developing and potential developing communities for some jurisdictions in our region. So in order to be responsive to this request, staff worked with local agency to analyze potential changes to the discussion scenario that would include growth in additional developing communities. Staff ultimately concluded that such modifications would not be justified given the sum of the total impacts, as well as inconsistency with prior methodology in developing the discussion scenario. And then also the potential for erosion of performance of the plan in its entirety for the region. Also, important to note here that prior to and at the April and May board and committee meetings, there has really been confusion around, as well as concerns from board members, local jurisdictional staff, and stakeholders around the 2025 blueprint and how that relates to the 2004 blueprint. So as an alternative to any additional modifications to the land use assumptions in the discussion scenario, and to address some of these concerns that we heard from board members, as well as stakeholder groups about the relationship between these two documents, the 2004 blueprint and the 2025 blueprint, staff is proposing to develop a series of statements that explicitly define the important roles that these two documents play in guiding regional planning activities, along with some of the key challenges related to implementation that the region faces. So within your committee packet, you have a full list of the draft statements of consideration. And I've also included a few of those statements here in the presentation today. So here's, as I noted earlier, here's one of those draft statements of commitment. So the statements of consideration are really meant to outline the region's commitment to the 2004 regional blueprint and its relationship to the 2025 MTP-SCS. So the draft statement you see on the screen in front of you here really seeks to clarify the fact that the 2004 blueprint is not being replaced. It will still serve as kind of our, as we term it here, the North Star for the region's future development. A few more of these draft statements of commitment. So this next one that you see on the slide really looks to clarify the relationship of the 2025 blueprint to the 2004 blueprint. And then we provided an abbreviated version of this presentation to the Policy and Innovation Committee on Monday of this week. And during that meeting, we received some input from board members that we should include the date at which the consistency here in this last statement of commitment that's listed in the screen in front of you is to ensure that the statement is not factually inaccurate once general plans or if general plans are updated, during and in between plan cycles. So in order to be responsive, we tweaked the language there and included a date, just a draft date, June 2024. That could potentially change, though. Obviously, the plan development is going to go into 2025 as well. So we'll update that accordingly, but we just wanted to show responsiveness to the comments we heard in the Policy and Innovation Committee meeting. So these are only a few of the draft statements. As I mentioned earlier, the full list are in your packet, and they are in draft form, obviously. And as you'll hear a bit later, we're looking for the Lunar Committee this committee to really direct staff to continue developing and refining these statements of commitment with the intent to incorporate them into the actual 2025 blueprint plan document later on. And the intent here is really to demonstrate SACOG's ongoing commitment to the original blueprint vision and also demonstrate how that effort continues to inform the development of SACOG's MTP-SCS. So now getting into the discussion scenario land use assumptions. So this part of the presentation will be addressing the single set of land use assumptions that staff is requesting that this committee recommend that the board adopt later this month. So as a reminder, the discussion scenario was developed around the following foundational considerations. So one, achieving the greenhouse gas target as a key regional policy priority. So we want to put something in front of you that we think can achieve the greenhouse gas target, and ensure that the region remains eligible for, key state transportation funding dollars. Two, that it could be feasibly implemented in that it is consistent with local general plans and meets the reasonableness test to ensure assumptions are achievable and acceptable by both state and federal government agencies. So the board will need to adopt a plan that is feasible to implement. So that was a necessary condition that staff embedded in this scenario, the discussion scenario. In fact, feasibility is something that we need to demonstrate as part of our sustainable community strategy compliance through the Air Resources Board. Three, it balances policy priorities such as the board adopted triple bottom line framework. And then it incorporates local feedback. So obviously in the development of the discussion scenario, as you've heard, we've conducted, that is SACOG staff has conducted extensive outreach to and engagement with local jurisdictional staff. The vast majority of the feedback we received during development of the discussion scenario were, relatively minor shifts to bring in assumptions more in line with the recent development trends, updates to key pipeline projects and policy changes or infrastructure investments. So SACOG made adjustments to the assumptions to reflect these comments. However, as I mentioned, and as we've discussed in committee as well as board meetings, there were a couple of more significant requests for shifts that were not included due to what I mentioned earlier. One, the sum of the totality of the impacts, the inconsistency with prior methodology in developing the discussion scenario, and that potential erosion in performance of the plan in its entirety if we brought in all those shifts. So where we landed in terms of the breakdown of housing and employment for the discussion scenario is shown here on the screen in front of you. And it's also provided in the staff report in your packet. I will note that attachment A in your packet includes the discussion scenario land use assumptions broken down by jurisdiction and community type. And that's the same large table that you received during the April presentation of the discussion scenario. So in terms of the housing for centers and corridors and established communities, you can see that the discussion scenario is, very close and in line with recent trends for the region as a whole, with 68% of total growth occurring in these community types, as opposed to recent trends where it's 67%. Additionally, the jobs growth in these areas within the discussion scenario is relatively close, although a little bit lower than recent trends. Now jumping into the developing community areas, the discussion scenario assumes more robust housing growth per year in these areas at approximately 3,000 units per year compared with recent trends for which we've only seen approximately 1,900 or so units per year. And then similarly, based on the jobs anticipated and designed for in many of these developing community specific plans, along with the policy priority to provide, a better jobs housing balance in developing community areas, the discussion scenario, also assumes robust job growth in these areas as compared to recent trends. And then, as mentioned earlier, as you're all well aware, meeting the region's greenhouse gas target is essential to ensuring the region remains eligible for key state transportation funding. So the discussion scenario, puts us within striking distance of achieving our greenhouse gas target. It really leaves us approximately 1% of reduction left in order to hit the target. I want to note here that achieving this last 1% or so of reduction will not be easy, and hitting the target will not be guaranteed. However, we do have additional strategies that we could include in the plan that will help us get the rest of the way there. But as you can see on the slide, by far the most effective strategy to reduce greenhouse gas emissions is through land use as well as transportation. which is to say that if there is any additional erosion to the discussion scenario land use assumptions, it will make achieving that greenhouse gas target much more difficult. All right, now I'll just jump into the staff recommendations. So based on everything I just summarized, there are two staff recommendations we would like you to consider here today. So one, the first is that this committee recommend that the SACOG Board of Directors adopt the land use assumptions of the discussion scenario to be part of the final preferred scenario for the 2025 blueprint. So based on staff's analysis, these land use assumptions really strike a balance between remaining reasonable while also pursuing ambitious growth and reinvestment priorities in existing communities. It accommodates robust growth in new growth areas, which is responsive to local priorities, and it provides the best path forward for achieving the policy goals of the blueprint and allows us to be within striking distance of hitting our greenhouse gas target. Then the second recommendation is that this committee recommend that the staff continue to develop the statements of commitment that define the relationship between the 2004 blueprint and that vision document and the 2025 blueprint plan and the challenges related to implementation. So for the board to potentially adopt or elect to continue developing in its June meeting. So with that, I'd like to pass it back to you.
Right. All right, very good. Thank you, Zach, for that presentation. So are there any brief questions before we take public comment and then we'll bring it back for deliberation? Yes, sir.
With regard to this statement of the linkage between the original blueprint and this blueprint document, is this a reaffirmation of the 2004 blueprint, or is it a statement about this one's not that one, not eliminating that one?
I think it's a little bit of both.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're not superseding, but we're still committed to the first one.
Yeah, so if you think of the MTPSCS and this, the 2025 blueprint, you can think of it kind of as like a phasing of the 2004 blueprint.
Imagine if we just hadn't used blueprint on this one. It would have been so much easier.
Well, I actually think
Sorry, I couldn't resist.
we were talking about how to remind people of the 2004 blueprint, and I think we have successfully done that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
So any other brief comment or questions? If not, we're going to go ahead and take some public testimony. And so we'll start with last first. So Mr. Osi, welcome.
And for members of the public, you'll have 3 minutes to speak, and I'll give you a warning at 1 minute remaining.
Is that on? Is that better? So I have a great name instead of 2025 blueprint called the roadmap. So anyway, thank you for having me. I wanted to rise today to express my appreciation to James and the SACOG team for listening and incorporating the statements of commitment into this current document as outlined. I mean, you've seen the stuff. Inclusion of these statements, frankly, is a ratification of a commitment to the 2004 blueprint, which has been a driving document for numerous people in the development business for decades. So I'm very pleased to see that, and fitting the 2025 work into that 2004 blueprint, I think is achievable, and I look forward to doing that. I do want to, I'll be much briefer today than I have been in the past. I want to reiterate my appreciation to James and his team for taking the time to sit with us on numerous occasions and talk through the things that we were concerned about and to have them reflected in the document in front of you. I do appreciate that. That is exactly the way it's supposed to work. So be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Very good. All right. Well, thank you for that. Any questions? Very good. Thank you, Mr. Osi. Nick Advis.
Good afternoon, everybody. Nick Avdis with the law offices Avdis and Cucci here today on behalf of the Upper West Side Project in the unincorporated part of Sacramento County. I just want to echo the sentiments about a lot of this probably could have been avoided with some nomenclature. I mean, that moniker obviously carries a lot of historical baggage, and I think that's obviously what we've focused in on and have some concerns about. Do appreciate staff, again, of it being made available to talk through some of our concerns. It's still a little bit fuzzy to me what the moniker is supposed to mean, but it's comforting to know I'm not the only one. So relative to some of the comments staff made, I do appreciate, the statement that the 2004 blueprint, continues to guide the development of the Sacramento region and that it's not in fact being replaced by anything. I mean, it's pretty clear that through this attachment C and the statements of commitment that there is a strong commitment to the 2004 blueprint growth principles, which really are the guiding force in guiding the region's growth. The conceptual map at the time was driven by local city and county general plans, and the current cycle of the MTP-SES is the latest in a series of regional plans helped to implement that 2024 blueprint. So while our particular project is not positioned and does not seek any land use allocation, it does embody the principles really baked into the 2004 blueprint. And not only that, but really the language and the spirit of LU 120, the county's general plan policy, which was approved as functioning as the pipeline for blueprint projects in the county outside of the urban services boundary and policy area. So I do want to commend the SACOG and the efforts.
Remaining in your public comment, 1 minute remaining.
Well, in any event, I appreciate the opportunity, and we'll continue to work with staff on some of the refinements to the language on attachment C. But thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Travis. All right. Susan Harry? Harry? Am I saying that correctly? Those are R's, not V's, right?
Thank you. It's Susan Harry.
Harry, very good.
It's a difficult name.
Welcome.
Good afternoon, directors, Director Corliss and staff. I'm Susan Harry. I'm the president of the board of directors of ECOS, that's Environmental Council of Sacramento. So my comments are regarding the 2025 blueprint and the land use scenario that you are trying to establish. SACOG has said that any land use scenario must meet two requirements, the greenhouse gas target, and it must be feasible. Our ECOS letter that we submitted to SACOG last week on May 29th describes our analysis and makes this overarching point that the projection for the building of 88,000 housing units in greenfield areas before 2050 does not meet the feasibility test. And this is because in the discussion scenario and in the option 3, complete communities, the housing units are kind of sprinkled over too many greenfields. We've spoken to experts who say it's not financially feasible for our region to grow in the way that you have allocated to greenfields, and that it doesn't represent how the region will actually grow between now and 2050. In the discussion scenario based on our analysis, only 9 of the 48 developments will achieve full build out by 2050. While our experts said that a greenfield project should build out in 20 years or less to be financially feasible, that is, to provide a timely payback to investors, in the discussion scenario, the time frame is much longer. Even with the aggressive rates of housing production in the scenario, the shortest build out is 29 years. Half of the developments will take 30 to 50. Okay, 30 to 50 years, and the remaining half will not complete until 2100 or later. So we believe the dispersed development pattern increases the risk to each developer. It depresses the total amount of housing built and it lengthens the build-out time because competition among housing developments that are simultaneously available in many places negatively affects sale price. And this condition then given our housing shortage, it hurts our overall economy and creates social problems. It also strains our region's ability to meet carbon targets and protect billions of dollars in state transportation funds. So what to do? One of the region's largest developers said that if they owned all the greenfields in the region, they would develop a phasing plan and build them out time to market demand. And the SACOG projection for the greenfields doesn't do that, but it could. And cities and counties do that all the time with their capital improvement program. Just one last point. Related to this, the 2025 blueprint purports to reflect the triple bottom line. And it would be really good to hear the values of environment, equity, and economy in your discussions. SACOG has engaged a social equity study over this past year, and we would recommend that the findings from that study be analyzed against the land use pattern before you adopt a land use scenario.
Very good.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, Clifton Taylor.
Honorable Chairman, members of the committee, I'm Clifton Taylor, President of Taylor Builder, a local land development company based in Roseville. Thank you for having me or allowing me to speak before the committee this afternoon. Late yesterday, Taylor Builder submitted a letter addressing some areas of concern and making recommendations on the MTP SCS policies. I'm not going to read the letter, but I do want to amplify and clarify a few matters. First, as has been said, the work your staff is doing is very important to increasing private investment in our region. For that, we are very appreciative. All our interactions with the SACOG team are very productive. This was especially helpful on our Stone Beetland entitlement, where we were able to obtain entitlements with a Sustainable Communities Environmental Assessment, not an EIR, for 1,175 units, a Transdorian development in the city of Sacramento adjacent to the Morrison Creek Light Rail Station. This project is breaking ground later this summer. That would not be the timeline had an EIR been required. Second, I want to clarify development and development communities is influenced by many factors not addressed in the letter. There's existing infrastructure, home price competitiveness, access to services, commute patterns, private developer capital access, capital gains, and income tax considerations, among many others previously addressed and unaddressed. These additional factors make it perilous to continue to use the equity model for distributing developing community units through the plan. That's not a failure of the SACOG team. That's a failure of local politics treating all projects as viable. I guarantee a significant amount of the 400,000 developing community units are not viable and may never be. I want to amplify the region needs a leader in public infrastructure funding best practices. We have completed projects where assessment district funding ranges from $20,000 to $45,000 per unit with identical home prices in the SACOG member agencies. If your community is on the lower end of that spectrum, you will see less investment and need to explore using additional tools to bridge the gap. And this needs to be done in a matter of where the development community can reliably invest on these changes. We believe SACOG could and should be the group to initiate that discussion in partnership with the development community. Fourth, I want to amplify my thoughts on infill development. This region has come a long way. Dialogue about infeasibility is a discredit to a lot of great local development companies that have transformed parts of our region and are committed to continuing that investment. Many new residents in the developing communities are here because of the investment that has been made in infill, creating destinations that did not exist 20 years ago. Remote work and employment patterns require our region to be competitive, and these places help us do that. Finally, I want to clarify my recommended third action related to procurement and administration of public funding. We're not suggesting a mirror image of the Green Means Go for developing communities. That's just an example for frame of reference. What we are suggesting is that the SACOG formally recognize their role as a primary agent in the sourcing and distribution of available funding across a broad platform as possible. We need a team captain in this space, and we feel like SACOG should play that role. Again, thank you for allowing me to speak today.
Thanks, Mr. Taylor. Right, so those are all the slips we have to speak, is that right, Mark?
Those are all the slips. I did receive 3 letters for public comment. A letter from Summers West, a letter from Taylor Builders, and a letter from the Environmental Council of Sacramento Ecos. All three letters were received and distributed to the committee members, are available in front of you, and are available at the table in the back of the room, and have been posted to the SACOG website under handouts 1, 3, and 4.
Very good. Okay, thank you, Robert. So just in general, is there any comments need to be made relative to the public testimony that we received before we start our discussion? No response needed, okay? All right. Good, okay, very good. So we'll return it back to the committee for further discussion. Who wants to jump in? Mr. Bates.
I just like to commend staff on their efforts during the last 2 years. That I appreciate the time and attention to hearing my county's concerns. And I know it's far from perfect, but it's at this point, it's something that we can all work with for the next 5 years. But for the next plan, I hope that we can see more attention to emerging, growing parts of our community earlier, and hear the voices of the development community and the rural stakeholders in the beginning of the process, opposed to at the end. But thank you for all that you guys have done, and I think it's I look forward to supporting the blueprint.
Any other issues?
Thank you, Director Baines, for making that comment, because that actually tees right into some language that I'd like to propose for to be drafted for inclusion in the attachment C. But I also want to go back and thank staff. And I agree that had the name blueprint not been invoked, there probably would be a lot less confusion about what the implications of this plan are relative to projects that are in the pipeline. And to the point from Ms. Hooray, the market is going to determine where to invest capital. And I don't know that that's necessarily something SACOG should be trying to do. And in fact, that was one of the really big considerations in the original blueprint, is that this is not usurping land use control of local agencies, and it is a broad brush map that is meant to invoke principles and considerations, and not necessarily parcel lines. And so I think that as we make that connection, we continue to keep that front of mind. And so, I still wonder about some of the allocations of units, but I feel like I'm way too late to the game to dig into that. But I will just say, I would put a cautionary tale toward holding up recent trends as the benchmark for what we hope to accomplish, because recent trends has gotten us into the worst housing shortage we've ever seen in this region in my lifetime. And so obviously what we've been doing isn't meeting the needs of what we ought to be doing. That's all I'll say relative to the actual discussion scenario. With respect to attachment C, I do have some language here that I think it speaks to Director Baines' point and to some of the points that others have mentioned. And as far as I can tell, all this language does is codify some of those assurances that we have given folks that have been expressing their concerns, to say that we will have a little bit longer runway when we go to do the update, and that we will always also recognize that not all projects are painted with the same brush, and that some of them won't perform well if they're factored in at lesser build out, but at full build out, maybe they actually will be help meet our goals. And so I have copies of the language here that I'm happy to pass out to anybody that would like to read it. But essentially, it's 2 bullet points, and the first one says, SACOG shall seek input during the preparation of the next MTP-SES update to determine which developing communities can most effectively assist the region in achieving its GHG and VMT reduction goals, and prioritize such areas when preparing the land use scenario. SACOG will work with its partner agencies prior to the next update cycle to determine how GHG VMT reductions in developing communities will be analyzed for purposes of this prioritization. Next bullet point, SACOG will consider creating a greenfield initiative that will utilize objective GHG VMT performance criteria and analysis to identify those developing communities under construction or likely to be under construction during the next plan cycle that will help the region meet state and federal environmental requirements through GHG VMT reductions when fully built out. These projects are expected to pursue funding at the federal, state, and local levels to incentivize developing communities that assist with achieving GHG VMT reductions. That's a lot to digest right here on the fly. So I'm happy to recognize that this is wordsmithing that can be crafted. As we look at refining this document and not expect it to be done prior to moving forward at the next board meeting.
Right, so so this is a little bit unique. I did have the opportunity to read it just shortly before the meeting. I'm sorry? I'm not able to hear. Is that better? So while not everybody else has had the opportunity to read it, I'm a little bit uneasy moving forward with language as presented, and I shared it with my colleague here. We can discuss it, but what I want to make clear is that we, as a committee, were charged early on by the full board with some very specific instructions around what we needed to do relative to the land use, the blueprint, and all the things that come along with it. We have been incredibly transparent. In fact, we digressed many times during the course of the last several months to make sure that we brought everybody along so that everybody had the same information so that we could work to get to a place as good as we can, maybe not perfect, but as good as we can, so we could make a recommendation to the full board as required by the construct of the subcommittee. So what I'd like to do is maybe just bifurcate this a little bit. My preference is to not embed it into what is currently the staff recommendation, but we can have the discussion and figure out how to proceed with it in the event that this committee wants to do that. But I'm a little bit uneasy attaching it to something that has been in the oven and being baked for quite some time. It just seems a little bit inconsistent with what we've been doing. So unless there are other thoughts around that, I would prefer that we sort of separate the two, but take them up nonetheless, if that's okay with the rest of the day. Yes, ma'am.
My understanding is that the conversation will continue. We're just authorizing to move forward, but we're continuing to hone in on the wording and the content. So this is just moving it forward. It's still in the works.
Well, I think there's a question about what you want to do today, right? So you've got two actions in front of you, the staff's recommended. One is the land use forecast, which, as Chair Vega said, right, as you know, we've worked really hard on, you've worked really hard on. And I think generally people seem okay. So that's one. The second are these statements of commitment. And I want to make sure that everybody here understands, and I think you heard it from some of our public testimony. We worked really hard more recently on these, right? We've heard a lot of concern about the difference between the 2004 and the 2025. We want to make sure that everybody understands we're not taking any local land use authority away. There is nothing in those that have to go along right with this. As Director Hume and I talked this morning, and I saw this language pretty recently. So I'll give you my thoughts on it, but I appreciate the spirit of this, but as we've talked about, this to me needs a lot of digesting. And this is a pretty major, either, a policy commitment or a programmatic commitment that I don't think we're saying no to. We would just like some time to digest it. So does that help? You got two actions. One is the land use scenario. And then the other, I think, as I heard Chair Viega says, is sort of the statements of commitment with this, suggestion here from Director Hume. And we can talk about this, but it sounds like maybe you want to bifurcate the discussion.
I have the impression the statements of commitment just seek to make sure that those that are further out don't get forgotten as part of it, and those that are already in it are in it still, in the blueprint still.
Yeah.
And so.
Yeah, as I look at it, yes, I think you're right. As I look at it, my suggestion would be there are two bullets. There's some language in here that I think is a little bit prescriptive for me. I'm uncomfortable with language that says shall and will prioritize and develop criteria. It just seems to me that as we contemplate what the next iteration of the blueprint or light blueprint or whatever the color it is, that as we consider that, it was never intended for this committee to be predetermining criteria for the full board as it contemplates the next iteration. So I'm comfortable suggesting in theory, as presented, that we would recommend to the full SACOG board as part of our process that, we would respectfully request that the full board consider, aspects of the developing communities, which we heard a lot of testimony about over the last 6 months, aspects of a strategy around greenfield initiatives, and ask the board for consideration of those. And in whatever form the full board says, yes, we want to contemplate these in preparation for the next iteration, and here are the steps we will take. That seems appropriate for the full board to digest. I just am uneasy that this committee would predetermine the criteria for the next iteration. It just seems a little bit prescriptive for me. So I would just simply separate the two. Yes, sir.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I agree completely. I think both of the spirit of both of these is righteous.
Yeah. Yep.
But they are policy initiatives that we should take up on their own merit, separate from what we're doing as an exercise of writing an MTPSCS. Because they look to the future for an additional round of doing this. And I think with respect to the second one, which I think is probably very important, and that's why we looked at that option 3 scenario of the discussion scenario. I think just, even if you just mine down on the word will help, there is an enormous amount of complexity to what helps and what doesn't help. So I think there's a lot of framing that needs to be discussed or analyzed before we got to the point where we can make this as a policy statement blanketly.
Mr.
So,
Chair,
yeah,
can
I agree. We should handle these separately and give the staff an opportunity to digest this and
Okay.
prepare some suggestions.
That's awesome. Thank you very much.
Through the chair.
Yes.
I just want to commend staff again for the time that they've put into this, and I'd like to make a motion to accept staff's recommendation as presented.
Second.
All right. So we have a motion and a second, and we can come back to the other item. So we have yes, sir.
I just have a quick comment. I too think there's tremendous merit in both of these bullet points. My question to staff would be, as we move forward in the process, we're going to come up to a point where we have to have some implementation policies surrounding the current MTPSCS that we're going to approve potentially next year or the end of this year, I suppose. Is that a time that we can bring this to the forefront in terms of affecting
Yes.
today as opposed to just not only the next MTPSCS?
That is a great point, and that was actually the point I was about to try to make, but you've made it, Director Lozano, perfectly, which is the second half of this plan cycle, right? Land use scenario this month, forecast, transportation projects, then implementation strategy. You remember Green Means Go came out of our last plan, right? Developed over months. And again, Director Hume, as we've talked about, I think the spirit, especially the second bullet, is an implementation strategy. And we will, if you give us direction today to keep working on this through implementation, come back to this committee. We would do that because we'd like to vet it with people, stakeholders, staff, right? Figure out what this means. We won't drop it. Because I'm sure that's probably a concern that folks might have, but we would love to pick this up, work on it, bring it back to you. Maybe this committee is a good forum to kind of kick this around as part of a set of implementation strategies that I would hope would also complement the infill side of this as well.
Yeah, and I just want to make one last statement about it is, we've heard over the last several months, many stakeholders come here and by telephone and email about concerns. And I think we have a couple of things that we're going to move forward on the implementation side in terms of recommendations already. And I don't necessarily have a fear of it getting dropped because what we've done here in some of the points of reaffirming the 2004 blueprint, I mean, we've already started to take those into consideration. So I guess I would just, Director Baines, I would ask that at least part of the motion include continuous directing staff to look at these bullet points and continue to work with not only Director Hume, but everybody else that we need to engage in the implementation phase where possible.
So I'm going to stick with the current motion that I had on the table or on the floor.
So we have so just clarification. So we have a motion, we have a second, but we have additional comments. So Director Hume.
Thank you, Chair. And I appreciate that this is unorthodox, but I got injected into this process very late. And so I only saw the attachment C with the staff report put forward for this meeting. So I felt this was timely. And you know, the attachment C is really the House rules by which this plan will be implemented. And what I'm trying to do is reduce confusion going forward, because anybody in this room may or may not be a part of that conversation. But I want to prevent so that those who are perhaps not mentioned, at least vaguely, in some of the attachment C language, don't feel like they're being left out. But I also want to prevent those who would want to stop them from being included from pointing back and saying there is no mention of you in any part of this plan anywhere. And so
Okay. So can I offer maybe a slight or a suggestion how to move this forward? So I would be willing to move or put forward a motion to memorialize exactly what you just said so that it doesn't get lost. But again, keep some degree of separation so that we don't add language at this committee at this hour in light of all the conversations we've had over these several months. So move it forward, but just separate the two so that they are separate, but cross-referenced in a way that doesn't get lost and doesn't get confused, or we don't get accused of having inserted language at the 11th and a half hour when we're, so.
So through the chair,
If that.
through the chair,
Yes.
I call for the question. There's a motion and a second.
Right,
on the floor.
so there's all right.
I'll
So that's for a
second
vote.
the substitute motion, which by rules of order would have to be
Would have to go
considered
first. That's correct. So comment on,
I just wonder if it would have to be agendized or if you can on something at the last minute like
well,
that.
maybe not a motion, but at least direction to staff to come back with some language to frame the essence of the recommendation. So that, yeah.
Chair Villegas,
Like that.
since we're talking about the whole thing at this point, I just want to make sure we have if you want to have a discussion on the principles, which again, I appreciate Director Hume, our conversation today. And, you know, I've only just seen the last couple of hours. Here's my first concern here, right? As your staff. If you want us to have an initiative to help Greenfield developments, which, as you know, this afternoon, we're going to sit down with Jackson Highway folks and talk about grants, right? Because true to our word, we said we would help. We cannot establish a program that helps every single Greenfield. And you need to establish priorities for us. You need to tell us which your priorities are in Greenfield. Because if we try to help every single one, we will fail. And I will observe in the last few months in this board, it's been very difficult to say that you want to prioritize one new growth area over the other, which is why we are here today, I believe, even with these principles. And so on the face of it, I've had an hour, 2 hours to read it. What I don't want you to do is set us up for failure. I don't think you want us to do that either. Green Means Go was a program that actually we had cities, if you remember this, that said our entire city is a green zone. And we said, no, you can't do that. You have to prioritize. And so just one concern, okay, very genuinely is to just take this language at face value, please don't set us up to assist every greenfield development, right, where it is very difficult, both for this board and at a local level, for you to establish a set of priorities, because we can't help everybody. So give us the time to work through this so we can come back to you with a thoughtful, strategic approach to which greenfields in this region could really benefit from assistance, which with a little bit of help, I don't know what that help looks like either, frankly. And I've talked to a number of you today, and you've had great ideas, but they've all been different ideas, right? So please just give us the time to work through this and we can have the discussion at the full board, but whatever you want to do. But I'm just expressing, if you want this to be successful and genuine, we need some time to work on this particular issue. Otherwise, I think everybody will be unhappy in 6 or 12 months because we won't have accomplished any kind of focus on this or any kind of meaningful impact on it. Does that make sense?
To me, it makes perfect sense, and I don't see anything in that language that precludes that process.
It's the discussion, it's the debates and the discussions that we've had at this board. You all have had a very difficult time, am I wrong? Making priority decisions on growth areas. This is why everybody wants to be in the plan, but not everybody can be in the plan, right? So I don't want, if I read that language, what I fear, and I don't read it in the language, Director Hume, I fear my experience and our staff's experience the last 6 months is you're going to ask us to help everybody. And we can't do that. And people won't be happy with that kind of help. So if what you're really saying is, let's pick 1 or 2 places in this region that could really use help, and it'd be great, and we'll do some finance, whatever it may be. I don't know what it is yet. Let us come back to you with those concepts. I'm fearful of adopting language in this committee today that I have only just seen the last couple of hours, but I agree with the board. This is a good concept, as we've talked about. We've had lots of discussions on this, so please don't set us up for failure.
All right, so we have a motion, we have a second on the first motion, we have a substitute motion, a second, a substitute motion.
Which is what?
First,
Chair Villegas, Director Saragosa's hands up online.
okay, yes, sir. So Director Saragosa, you want to chime in?
Yes, thank you all. I just wanted to make a quick comment. From my perspective, I thought maybe the best way to go forward was kind of with the original motion, a clean motion, and then for this board to give direction back to staff, whether it's 6 months, come back in 6 months with some, ideas on the language that's put in front of us. I mean, it took us, what, year and a half or more to come to the Green Means Go sort of criteria and how we did that. It's not likely that we're going to figure this out by the next board meeting, what this language means and how it actually all plays out. So we can have that discussion at the board meeting. You have my commitment to certainly bring it up. But I also want to be realistic about what that's going to actually entail. So to me, that would be a cleaner way of doing it, but certainly defer to how you all want to handle it. Thank you.
All right, very good. Thank you for that.
Mr. Chair, if I may?
Yep.
The original motion includes both bullet points. I heard comments about bifurcating it, and then also in addition to that, bringing parameters around the second bullet point. I would request that the substitute motion be clarified, whether that will be bifurcated or not, or whether it's the original motion plus parameters.
I'm sorry, can you go back and repeat what you said was the first motion? Because that's,
Motion is just to pass those staff
right,
recommendations.
yeah, I was gonna say, that's my understanding. Or we'll have them restate it, just to be clear, but I think there's a little confusion about what I think was intended and what you just said.
Understood.
So if you'll clarify your motion, we can start from the beginning. So,
So I recommend that we move forward with staff's recommendation.
got it, without the additional language.
That's correct.
Yeah, and we had a second for that. So that, and then we had an attempt for a substitute motion,
Which you made.
no, I didn't make a substitute motion. I'm willing to entertain another, it's not a substitute motion. It'll be a separate motion,
Oh,
a separate direction to staff. I'm not making a substitute motion. So.
okay.
Directions, because we've not properly agendized this language. So if you're not indicating a substitute motion, then we only just have the original motion with a second. We've called the question. So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
All right, so that'll be the order for the original staff recommendation, which is to move forward with the discussion scenario for further consideration and the development of the statements of commitment. Is that what you're referring to them as? Okay. All right. So did you want to pick up on the discussion for the language that you're suggesting on how we might characterize it to go to the full board for consideration, or how you might want to?
Mr. Chair, I think
Yes.
we have a commitment by the current chair of SACOG.
We
to
do.
bring it to the full board as a discussion for direction to staff on these items. So it feels like we've managed to move this ahead.
And I think it takes a little bit of time to understand
Yeah.
really how it impacts
Got it.
us.
Yep.
That's what I'm hearing from James.
Yes, I think he's saying yes to that. So we're good with that.
What I guess, just so I understand. All right, you just moved the staff recommendation. There's interest in this language. And our chair has said he'd bring it back to the full board. I guess the question is, are you bringing that in June? Are you asking us to go, are you directing us to go work on this and come back in the near future? I'm not sure on the timing. I'm
Well-
clarifying the direction here.
Got it.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I'll just say, I was under the impression at this meeting today, we had two actions in front of us. And that was to move forward the discussion scenario and to direct staff towards the development of the statement of considerations. My bullet points speak to the development of those statement of considerations. I thought I was being timely in bringing forward language for consideration. If that happens at this committee, if that happens at the full board, if that happens at some later date, I'm okay with any of that. If these considerations are not somehow codified in the plan, I can't go along with it. As you were there virtually last time, I can't put forward a plan that I don't think is realistic in its anticipations, either one way or the
Yeah,
other.
no, I hear that. So I think there's a way to address that. So I think it might be best, given where we are, we've already voted, is to bring these items before the board for consideration at the meeting whereby the full board will be discussing and taking up eventual decisions about the land use scenarios that we've recommended, right? So it can be still brought up. We don't have final authority. We are simply a body making recommendations to try to get it good, not perfect, just as good enough, given the time constraints that we've been given. So I think we're at that point where it's about as good as it's gonna get, but there's one piece still remaining, which is your concerns about a couple of things. I think that can still get raised by you at the board for consideration when the full board takes it up, and they can either take it on or not. I think that's right. I mean, unless I'm speaking out of turn, yes, ma'am.
I guess when it comes back, we need to know if this impacts our numbers, I guess. Is that that's where you're coming from?
Absolutely, right? And again, with a couple of hours to think about this, and I'm looking at the rest of my team here, like, we'll take the first bullet point. Okay, hey, greenfields that do good by VMT and greenhouse gas emissions, that sounds great in concept. We brought an option to you in May, option 3, did that, and there was a lot of consternation. And my sense is, and I'll look again for my staff to clarify this, but actually what Director Bain said earlier about Sutter Point and Director Hume, what you kind of embodied the spirit of this, those actually may be in conflict. They may be in conflict. And I don't know, right? So I want to be very, our staff takes its job very seriously, right? We're proud in the analysis we do. We don't want to bring something to you that is premature, that we're not giving you the full 360 on. Right? Nobody wants that. You want to know what you're committing yourselves to here. And I don't myself know exactly what you're committing yourself to here, but I want to know that. I want to get my staff working on it. I want to have some stakeholder input into this. Because I think in concept, I totally understand where you're coming from, Director Hume, in concept, right? And in the execution of the commitment, what I don't want to do is have you or ask us to make a commitment that actually is not what you thought it would be. I think we learned that, again, through the May decision to do the option 3. It didn't turn out how we thought it would turn out. So I'm asking for some time so we can do that and work on it. And I don't know if that's bring it to you in June or on the statements of commitment, we were just merely trying to address people's concern. You heard the public testimony. I think we had done that. But there's nothing time-wise that you have to all adopt that in June. You could ask us to keep working on it.
I just want to say that it seems like an initiative that would utilize objective greenhouse gas and VMT performance criteria and analysis to identify developing communities would bring clarity to developers. It would bring clarity to a process that would help people compete. It would make it competitive. It wouldn't take out the competition. It would just bring clarity to the development community so they know what to bring so they can win. They can get in. They can meet the window.
Sure. I think in concept, bringing clarity and predictability and certainty, right, is something I think we can all agree on. My one of my many questions would be, Director Kozlowski has made this point. If we did option 3, back to the fewer greenfields, more consolidated, SACOG can't wave a magic wand and make that happen. All of you, as local jurisdictions, have to actually back that up. If you want us to actually really turn the dial up on VMT and the best performing, are you willing in your local jurisdictions to do the same thing?
So through the chair.
Yeah.
So just for clarification, that when I made the motion, it was seconded, there was a Vice Chair Lozano asked for a friendly amendment and I declined to make that amendment.
Right.
So my understanding is what we voted on was to take staff's recommendation to the entire board to accept the blueprint or what, this is not part of.
Right.
And this isn't going to Yuba City.
Got it. Yep.
Right?
Yeah. No, fair enough.
I
Okay.
just want to make sure that.
No, your point well taken. I think everybody's understanding that now, but thank you for the reminder to take us back. So first of all, I want to thank our staff. An amazing amount of time and energy and a lot of holidays were ruined over this. I know for a fact, all of you worked during the holidays to get this to the point where it is, for the subcommittee to make the recommendations. Clint, Dob, and Zach, and Rami, thank you so much for all of your work on getting us to this point. And now we're going to take it to the full board for consideration. I think we've got a commitment by the chair to take this item up in the very near future to have the board deliberate on its merits as it goes forward. So I think sufficient staff direction has been given. I think we're at a point where we're ready to move on unless there's anybody that's going to bring anything up, anything else that's not already been said.
I just want to clarify what I was trying to say, that when it does come back, how does it impact? Does it impact already existing projects that are in the blueprint and getting ready to break out, to change this methodology or to make adjustments? That's what we need to know. I'm not asking if it does that. I'm assuming it does something. We need to know how it impacts not only future, but the past and those that are already in the queue that have earned their place that were there, ready to go. Right?
And I'll look at my staff. I would just say, I don't think we're going to be able to do that by June 20th. Is that clear? Like, I don't think we would know that by June.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. Right. If there's nothing else on that item, which I don't see, thank you very much again to our staff for getting us to this point. That was the easy item. So let's go to the tough item now. The next one is item 3, the upcoming SACOG board workshop. Who's presenting on that one?
Is it about
Hi.
objective VMT standards?
Yes. Exactly. Got it. Just like that.
Hi, I'm Greg Chu. I'm on the planning staff. And this item is an information item about a workshop at the June 20th full board meeting. The city, Yuba City, is going to make a presentation to the board about an analysis it did on an infill site in conjunction with SACOG. This is part of the Green Means Go program. We've been talking to all of our jurisdictions about the challenges of doing infill, and through a Green Means Go grant plus the state's regional early action planning grant that we got from the state, we approached the city of Yuba City as well as Marysville about individual infill sites that each have and whether or not we could help with doing an analysis. So in Yuba City, they had a site that's currently owned by the hospital there in their downtown, and they wanted an analysis of whether or not the site was viable. We worked with the Urban Land Institute. They offered 6 volunteers in professional capacities, architects, finance, marketing, development, to help look at the site, analyze it. They looked at it. The hospital came back and considered what they came up with, said that they had planned to use it for hospital purposes. A second site was analyzed for the city, and that's what they're going to present about at the June 20th meeting, and talk about what some of the challenges are and also what some of the opportunities are that they have to make that infill site viable. So that's basically the short story of what you're going to see on June 20th. And I'll be glad
Mr.
to
Chair?
answer any questions.
I just like to make comments. That our county administrative officer is also going to be making a presentation at that meeting as well.
The city is coordinating its speakers. I don't know who they have decided to have speak, but
So what we'd, as we talked about, what we'd love to do is have both you and Director Harris open it up, welcome, right? So Yuba City and Sutter County. And then I think we're very happy to work with Steve.
Yes.
Your county administrator, put something on the agenda that can also highlight. Because we've typically done, if you remember in Woodland and actually Chirviegas was, the county supervisor welcoming the county, the city welcoming the city. And so if there's, I've commitment to, I'll work with Steve to make sure we can get something highlighting Sutter County and what you're working on.
I just, real quick, I look forward to welcoming you all to SACOG staff and the board to Sutter County and Yuba City. So look forward to that meeting.
Forward to it. Yeah.
June 20th, Thursday, June 20th, and be there early for an 8 a.m. pop-up mobility hub. Details coming. Oh, don't laugh it off. Are you done, Greg, or did you
I am
have
done.
more?
He's done.
Okay.
Yeah.
All
All
right.
right. All right. Well, thank you, Greg. Thank you so much. Looking forward to the 20th and looking forward to you guys hosting. So any other comments on that? If not, then
For the record, there's no public comment. on
and
that.
there is no public comment. That's right. Yeah, thank you. All right. Item 4 is SACOG's Denver tour. James?
All right. Here's the great news. 20 of you as board members are coming to Denver, 2/3 of the board, and a number of developers, and other guests. We're very, by the way, thankful to be sponsored by SMUD for this trip. We always look for local sponsors and SMUD stepped up. This is, if you haven't been to the Denver region ever, or in the last 10, 20 years, you're going to see a lot of changes. The story in Denver quickly goes back to 2004 when they passed a multi-county, I believe a 7-county sales tax for transportation. You're going to ride on one of those projects, the A-Line public-private partnership from inside the DIA Denver Airport all the way downtown. We're going to look at toll lanes. We're going to look at planning for bus rapid transit along suburban corridors and a lot of housing. Just based on the conversation you just all had, a lot of the opportunities, lessons learned, and challenges around kind of suburban infill and redevelopment. So an old mall, super block mall, Via Italia that was scraped and is now the Belmar mixed use development. An old airport, Stapleton Airport, which is now Central Park, mixed use, lots of housing, and Lowry Air Force Base decommissioned, which I actually think has a lot of Yuba Sutter appeal, which has a lot of housing going in there. We're gonna be talking about affordable housing. We're going to be connecting it back to equity and a lot of our race equity inclusion work. And our sister agency there, DRCOG, Denver Regional Council of Governments, the best acronym of any COG in the country. They do wear white lab coats and have stethoscopes, and they'll check your heart for your regional love and see how it's going. Anyway, DRCOG is, I had to give you
That was a
something.
bridge too far.
I
The
had to-
regional love, like I was
Now you're
talking with you.
overselling it. You
Come
gotta
on.
manage expectations.
DRCOG is, but really your peers, and I know you all have done this and with other fellow, sister agencies, and they're very excited to host you. Some of the elected officials from their board are excited to have you in Denver, and so looking forward to it. It's a Wednesday night, the 26th to Friday, the 28th. I will tell you Southwest, which I think is all too common these days, right? Moved our return flight back to 6 p.m. There's nothing we can do about that. So I'm hoping that works for you all. So but we're very, very looking forward to having everybody there.
Yep, no, that. Yeah. Yes, it is. Yeah. And I use that A-line every month. It's gonna be a treat. Okay, all right. Any questions or thoughts on that? If not, all right, thank you very much for that. James, item 5 is the land.
I'm going to shock you by saying there's no public comment. on
Thank
that.
you. You're not gonna shock me. You just say it. I just run right. Yeah, okay, thank you. No public comment on that one. And item 5 is the land use implementation activities for June. Indrani, welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, committee members. This information item highlights the blueprint land use implementation activities that SACOG staff regularly undertake. In the past, we would submit a receive and file item with a summary of these activities to the Lunar Committee and the board every month. But this year, we are trying to report on these activities as an information item to this committee every few months. We just heard from Zach about the 2025 blueprint and how it relates to the implementation of the original 2004 blueprint with the statements of commitment in attachment C. Looking back at the original blueprint, the idea was to create a future with reduced air pollution and traffic congestion and a better quality of life for our residents. As part of that process, we adopted a set of principles: housing choice and diversity, transportation options, mixed use, compact development using existing assets, quality design, and conserving natural resources. Since the adoption of the blueprint, implementing these principles has guided everything we do at SACOG. The more formal SACOG projects and programs, like the 2025 blueprint we just talked about, or our funding round, attempt to implement the original 2004 blueprint. As we know, work doesn't stop when we adopt a plan or fund a project. It requires an intentional follow-through. This item focuses on the suite of activities, letters, outreach, and technical assistance beyond the formal SACOG projects and programs that staff provides on a regular basis to aid the blueprint implementation. In the discussion analysis section of the staff report for this item, you will see a bullet list of all the activities between February and May this year. I'm just going to highlight a few of these activities to give you a sense of the types of services we can provide you and your staff in the interest of furthering our shared goals. One of those activities is coordinating and supporting competitive grant applications or programs. We continue to work with the recipients of the Green Means Go funding program, as well as the Regional Early Action Planning grants, both of which SACOG administers. The ongoing technical assistance that SACOG provides to the City of Ileton on its grant projects and the coordination with Yuba City on a site-specific infill development analysis that we just heard about are some of the recent examples. Green Means Go is one of the key programs we have for implementing the blueprint. Proposed budget cuts at the state level to some of the seed money for this program would have jeopardized some of the projects we've already awarded funding. As our state lobbyists reported at the Policy and Innovation Committee early this week, those budget cuts have been rolled back, thanks to all the advocacy efforts by SACOG and its member jurisdictions. On the Green Means Go program front, we are also happy to report that SACOG received $22.5 million federal grant under the Reconnecting Communities Neighborhood Access Program for planning, design, engineering activities supporting locally adopted green zones. This work is a partnership between SACOG and 10 member jurisdictions. Recently, Green Means Go staff also worked with partners throughout the region on yet another grant application. The Sacramento Metropolitan Air Quality Management District submitted a regional grant application to the Federal Climate Pollution Reduction Grant Program. If awarded, this would bring nearly $40 million to fund Green Means Go capital infrastructure development. And finally, one of the most common things you find included in the staff reports for this item are the MTP SCS consistency letters that SACOG provides for certain housing and mixed-use projects. One of the key parts of SB 375, which was modeled after our blueprint process and guides our long-range plan, is that certain types of housing and mixed-use projects can get some environmental review relief if they meet specific criteria, including being consistent with our MTP-SCS, the Metropolitan Transportation Plan Sustainable Community Strategy. If a project applicant or a city wants to confirm whether a particular project is consistent with our plan, they can approach SACOG to concur with their determination. SACOG uses a worksheet to evaluate the project and then provides a letter to the lead agency and the applicant that confirms if the project is consistent with our plan. We are one of the leaders in the state in using this CEQA streamlining. We try to advertise this service to our member agencies, given how useful it can be for them. These are some of the activities staff have been working over the last few months on the blueprint implementation. As I mentioned, this is going to be a recurring info item every few months for you all to track all that SACOG staff are doing to implement the land use component of the blueprint. While some of these activities occur on a regular basis, others can be one-time activities. We do our best to stay on top of all the opportunities to help, but it's a big region with 28 jurisdictions. And we really benefit from you and your staff reaching out for support. So whenever you come across a project or an opportunity that you think would benefit from SACOG support, please don't hesitate to reach out or have your staff reach out. We are here as a resource for you and your staff. Thanks for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
All right, very good. Well, thank you, Indrani, for the report and presentation. This is not an action item, so are there any comments or questions, concerns, thoughts? Thank you so much. All right, seeing none. All right, very good. Thank you so much.
And for the record, there's no public comment on this item.
And there are no public comments. They're very good. Thank you, Rob. At some point, I'll figure that out. All right, so that is our final formal agenda item. Are there any other matters that any of the members want to take up? None? Okay. Yes, sir. Yeah.
Folsom Pro Rodeos, July 3rd, 4th, 5th, and thanks to the sheriff of Sacramento County, 6th as well. Get your tickets now. They will go fast and be gone.
Right, they always are. Yeah, very good.
Mr. Chair, real quick, I know actually Chair Saragosa has been very aware of our board meetings running kind of late, getting into lunchtime. August is going to be a 9 a.m. start. I'm hoping that that is going to be okay for all of you coming from a little further away. Yeah. Well, could we have some peaches in June? Okay.
Whatever.
So a 9 a.m. start in August.
Right. Yeah.
And just to build on Indrani's presentation, thank you to all of you that have helped on the REAP 2, the proposed cuts to REAP 2. In front of you, there's a letter signed by 17 mayors, several of them in this room. That, along with a lot of other effort, has made the legislature put forward a package to restore 250 of the 300 million proposed cuts. So your voices have significantly been heard. And now it's up to the legislature and the administration to negotiate on this, along with all the other proposed cuts. So that's the next step. Stay tuned, but you've at least got the legislature's attention through a lot of hard work here locally. So thank you for all of that.
Very good. No other reports?
Something, yeah, so next weekend, Father's Day weekend, is the Crawdad Festival. The City of Alton Crawdad Festival, because there's one at Cal Expo that last year's promoter that did ours, and like when it was brought to council to select the promoter for that, we went with the one that did the 2019 Summerfest, not him. So he got petty and decided doing it at Cal Expo. I'm like, oh, this is gonna be interesting.
Yeah, surprising to see that on the marquee the other day driving down.
And in traffic issues, I'm sure that, I mean, since we just had a transportation meeting,
Yeah.
I'm waiting to see what the traffic is going to be for that weekend.
Yep, for sure. Well, thank you, Pam, for the update. If there are no other updates, then we are adjourned. Thank you very much.